Chapter 9. The Story of the Treasure. The next morning Dantes returned to Faria's room. Faria looked a little better. He showed Dantes a small piece of paper. Half of it was burnt away. Edmund said, "I can't see anything except broken lines and words." "I know what the words mean," said Faria. "But first I will tell you the story of this paper. I was the friend and helper of Prince Spada, the last of the princes of that name. I was very happy with him. A long time ago, his family was very rich. People often say, as rich as a Spada. But my friend, Prince Spada, had very little money. He told me about another Spada. This man lived and died at the time of Cesare Borgia. Cesare Borgia needed money for his wars, but the country was very poor. Finally, he thought of a plan. He asked two famous rich men, Rospigliosi and Spada, to dinner. Rospigliosi was very pleased, but Spada was a wise man. "Cesare Borgia wants my money," he thought. "He will kill me." He wrote a note. Then he went to the dinner. There was death in the glass of wine in front of him. "If I don't drink the wine, Borgia will kill me in another way," he thought. So Spada drank and died. Cesare Borgia took all the dead man's papers and the last letter that Spada wrote before the dinner. This said, "I give everything to my brother's child, all my money and all my books. Tell him to keep the prayer book with the gold corners carefully. It will help him to remember his uncle." Cesare looked everywhere. There were some gold cups and a little money, very little, and he took those. But he could not find the treasure of the Spadas. Years passed. The famous prayer book stayed in the family, and my friend the prince now owned it. Like many people before me, I looked through all the family papers, through rooms full of papers. Where was the treasure of the Spadas? I found nothing. I read the history of the Borgia family. Cesare Borgia took all the Rospigliosi's money, true, but I found no information about the Spada treasure. I was sure that the treasure was still hidden somewhere. My friend died and left everything to me. He asked me to write a history of the Spada family. In 1807, a month before I became a prisoner, I was reading some papers. I fell asleep. It was evening when I woke up. The only light was from the fire. I felt for a piece of paper. I wanted to get a light for the lamp from the fire. I didn't want to burn any important papers, but I remembered a piece of plain white paper in the prayer book. I took it and put a corner in the fire. The fire began to burn the paper. Suddenly I saw yellow writing. I quickly put out the fire and looked at the paper. There were words on it. You could only read them when the paper was hot. I burnt a lot of the paper, but the last piece is in your hands." Dantes looked again at the yellow writing. "And now," said Faria, "look at this." He gave Dantes a second piece of paper with broken lines of writing on it. "Put the two pieces together." On May the 25th, 1498, Cesare Borgia invited me to dinner. He wants to kill me. He wants all my money. When I die, give everything to Guido Spada. It is hidden safely on the island of Monte Cristo. Guido knows the place because we visited it together. All my gold and money are there. Lift up the 22nd rock from the beach at the east end of the island. Find the steps that go underground. Break into the second room. The treasure is in the northeast corner of the room. Cesare Spada, May 25th, 1498. Yes, Dante said. I understand. But the writing on the second piece is different. It is my writing, said Faria. I thought about it and completed the old paper. When I understood the words, I left immediately. But the government was afraid of me. When I went on board the ship, soldiers took me prisoner. Faria looked at Dantes. And now, my dear man, he said, you know as much as I do. If we ever escape together, half this treasure is yours. If I die here, all of the treasure is yours. You are my son. You were born to me in this prison. God sent you to help a sad old prisoner. Thank you, said the young man to Faria. But we will never have the treasure, because we won't leave this prison. My real treasure is your teaching and your wise words. Chapter 10. The Death of Faria. The days passed. Faria talked about his treasure, and he thought about ways of escape for his young friend. I am afraid that I will lose the letter, he said to Dantes. Learn it, every word. Then he burnt the paper. Faria could not use his arm and leg, but his words and thoughts were clear. He continued to teach Dantes history and English and other subjects. He also taught him to make things, a useful skill for a prisoner. They were always busy. Dantes worked hard. He wanted to forget the past. One night, Edmund woke up suddenly. He heard a weak voice call his name through the darkness. He moved his bed, took out the stone, and hurried along the underground path. The other end of it was open. It was dark, but he saw the old, white-faced man holding on to the end of his bed in great pain. Ah, my dear friend, said Faria, you understand, don't you? You know that the time has come. Don't say that, cried Dantes. I have saved you once. I will save you again. He quickly lifted up the foot of the bed and took out the little bottle. There was still some red liquid in it. Look, he cried, there is still some in here. Tell me what to do. There is no hope, Faria replied. But you can try to save my life. Do the same thing, but don't wait too long. If I don't get better, pour the rest into my mouth. Now put me on my bed. Edmund took the old man in his arms and put him on the bed. Dear friend, said Faria, you are good to me. You bring me great happiness. If you escape, go to Monte Cristo. Take the treasure and enjoy it. God go with you." Dantes waited, holding the bottle of liquid in his hand. When it seemed to be the right time, he poured a little of the liquid into Farias' mouth. Then he waited. He waited for 10 minutes. Half an hour. Then he put the bottle to Farias' mouth and poured in the rest of the liquid. Faria moved. His eyes opened. He gave a little cry. Then silence. Edmund sat with his hand on his friend's heart. The heart became weaker and weaker, and then the old man's body slowly went cold. Dantes went down into the underground path and put back the stones behind him. He was lucky. A few minutes later the guard arrived. He went first to Dantes' room. Then he went on to Faria's room with his breakfast and some clothes. "What is happening in my friend's room?" Dantes thought. "I must know." He went down the underground path and heard the guards' cries. Other guards came. "Finally," one of them said, "the old man is gone to look for his treasure. I hope that he has a good journey. And now we can prepare him for his grave," another man said. "Put him in a simple bag of plain cloth. That is enough for a grave at the Chateau d'If." Then there was silence. "Perhaps they have gone away," Edmund thought. "But I am not sure, so I can't go inside." After an hour he heard a noise. It was the governor, and there was someone with him. "Yes," said an unknown voice, "Faria is dead." "I am sure that he is," the governor said, "but by the rules of the prison we must check." Dantes heard more footsteps. People went in and out of the room. Then he heard someone pull a large piece of cloth along the floor. There was another sound from the bed when somebody put a heavy weight on it. "In the evening," said the governor, "at about 10 or 11. "Shall we stay with the body?" "No, that isn't necessary. Lock the door." The steps went away, and the voices disappeared. Someone locked the door. Then there was silence, the deepest of all silences, the silence of death. Dantes lifted the stone. He looked carefully round the room. There was nobody there. He went in. Chapter 11. The Grave of the Chateau d'If. On the bed, Dantes saw a long bag of dirty cloth. The body of his friend Faria lay inside it. Alone. I am alone again, Dantes thought. And then he stopped. He looked at the bag, and a strange thought came to him. Only dead people leave this prison. I can take the place of the dead. There was no time to think about it. Dantes opened the bag with Faria's knife. He took the body from the bag and carried it along the underground path to his own room. He laid the body on his bed and pulled the bedclothes over its head. Then he kissed the cold face and turned it to the wall. The guard will think that I am asleep, Dantes said to himself. He returned to Faria's room, took off his clothes and hid them. Then he got inside the bag and lay exactly like the dead body. I have made my plan, he thought. Will the men discover me when they carry the bag outside? Will they find a living man, not a dead body? If that happens, I will cut open the bag from top to bottom with the knife. Then I will escape. If they try to catch me, I will use the knife. Perhaps they will put me in the grave and cover me with earth. It will be night. I only hope that the grave is not too deep. Another thought came to him. When the guard brings my evening meal at 7 o'clock, will he notice Faria's body in my bed? But no, I am often in bed when the man comes. He just puts the food on the table and goes away again in silence. If he speaks to me this time, what will happen then? When he gets no answer, will he go to the bed? Dantes waited for the cries of the guard, but the hours passed and the prison was quiet. Finally, Edmund heard footsteps outside. He must be brave now, braver than ever before. The footsteps stopped outside the door. There are 2 of them, Dantes decided. He heard them put down some wood. They are going to carry the body on that, he thought. The door opened. Through the cloth of the bag he saw 2 shadows come to the ends of his bed. Another man stood at the door with the lamp. He was a thin old man, but he is heavy. One man was lifting up his head. The other man lifted his feet. "Have you tied it on?" the first speaker asked. "Not yet. We don't want to carry unnecessary weight," the other man replied. "I can do that when we get there." Tied it on? Tied what on? Thought Dantes. The men put the body on the piece of wood. Then they moved up the steps. Suddenly Dantes felt the cold, fresh night air. The men walked about 20 meters, then stopped and put the body down. One of them went away. Dantes heard the sound of his shoes on the stone. "Where am I?" he asked himself. "Here it is. I have found it." Edmund heard the man put a heavy weight onto the ground next to him. Then he tied the weight round Dantes' feet. "Is that tied carefully?" asked the other man. "Yes, it won't come off," was the answer. The men lifted Dantes up again, and they began to walk. Now Dantes heard the sound of waves against the rocks. "We are finally here," said one of the men. "Don't stop yet," said the other man. "You know very well that the last one fell on the rocks. Don't you remember that the governor was angry with us?" They went 5 or 6 more steps. Then they lifted Dantes by his head and by his feet. "1," said the men, "2, 3, and away!" They threw Dantes into the air. He was falling. A heavy weight pulled him quickly down. Finally, with a great noise, he fell into the cold water. When he hit the water, he gave a cry. Then the water closed over him. "They have thrown me into the sea," Dantes cried to himself. "They tied a big stone to my feet. It is pulling me down to the bottom of the sea." This is the grave of the Chateau d'If. The sea. Chapter 12. The Young Amelia. Dantes was wise. He kept his mouth shut after that first cry of surprise. In his right hand he still held the knife. He quickly cut open the bag, got one arm out and then his body. The stone pulled him down and down, and he felt very weak, but he reached down and cut the stone free. Then he swam quickly to the top of the water, and the stone fell to the bottom of the sea. Dantes felt the night air on his face. He began to swim under the water because he did not want the guards to see him. When he came up again, he was nearly 100 meters from the prison. Above him he saw a black and stormy sky. In front of him lay the great black sea. Behind him, blacker than the sea, blacker than the clouds, stood the Chateau d'If. It was a large and terrible place. The rocks around it seemed to reach out to take him back. And on the highest rock there were 2 men holding a lamp. They are looking at the sea, Dantes thought. Perhaps they heard me shout. He went down again under the water and stayed there for a long time. When he came up again, he could not see the light. He began to swim out to sea. He swam for hours. He was trying to reach an island. In 2 or 3 hours, he thought, the guard will go into my room. He will find the body of my poor friend. He will look for me and not find me, and then he will call for help. The soldiers will discover the underground path. They will question the men who threw me into the sea. They will send boats of soldiers to find the escaped prisoner. Everyone will search for a hungry man without clothes. Soldiers will look for me in Marseille, and the governor and his men will search for me on the sea. I am cold. I am hungry. I have lost my knife. Oh, my God, help me. Oh, help me. After Dantes said this prayer, he looked towards the Chateau d'If. He saw a small ship coming out from Marseille. It was moving quickly out to sea. It came near him. He shouted and waved his hand. The ship turned towards him and let down a boat. There were 2 men in the boat. Dantes began to swim to it, but he was too weak. He gave a cry, and one of the men in the boat shouted, "Be strong, we are coming." Dantes heard their words. A wave passed over him. He came up to the top of the water, and then he went down again. The water closed over his head. I am dying, he thought. Then someone caught him by the hair and pulled him up. After that, he heard and saw nothing. When Dantes opened his eyes, he was on board the ship. Where are we going? He thought. He looked out through a small window. We are leaving the Chateau d'If behind. The captain came to see him. I am a seaman, and I lost my ship in the storm, Dantes told him. You can stay on my ship, the captain said, but you will have to work. Suddenly, a loud noise rang across the waters. Hey, what is that? Cried the captain. A prisoner has escaped from the Chateau d'If, replied Dantes. Is he the escaped prisoner? The captain thought. He looked at Dantes. Does it matter? Even if it is him, he will be useful to us. The ship was called the Young Amelia. It carried goods to quiet shores on dark nights. There were no customs officers in these places, so the captain did not pay money to the government for the goods. At first, the captain did not tell Dantes about his business. I do not know this man, he thought. Perhaps he is a government officer. But after some days, he started to like Dantes.